Hey Dad, I love playing bad games, and Steam happens to have thousands of them. Most of these are titles that are so bad, they'll make you regret the fact that you bought them or even spent your time trying them out. Scams, cash grabs, even just poorly optimized projects. But if you want the real gems beneath the garbage, you're going to have to wade through the muck. But that's what I'm here for. Today, I'm going to be taking another look at 10 of the worst rated games on Steam. I chose different projects from among the mixed, negative, and overwhelmingly negatives. If you've seen this series before, then you already know that I try to give each game on this list a fair shake. I attempt to see both the good and the bad with each title. My intention is not just to trash all of these poorly received games, but to see where they failed and maybe where they succeed. Also, to ultimately understand them. If you want to understand why something is good, it helps to understand why something is bad. If you enjoy the video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe, as it really helps me out. You can also subscribe to my Patreon if you'd like to support the channel further and get some extra content not available on YouTube. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I'd like to once again talk about bad games. Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation 2 is a third-person mech shooter developed by Bandai Namco Forge Digitals. It was released on May 30th, 2023, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 6,868 reviews, 34% of those being positive. Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation 2 is a mobile game that was ported to PC, and you can tell. Now, to start off, I'm not a fan of Gundam. I've never watched the series or read the manga or even played any of the games. The only mech thing I've ever really watched was Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I think that's about as far from Gundam as you can possibly get while still including mechs. Mobile Suit Gundam BO2 is basically a gacha game about Gundam, though. You start through a bunch of tutorials that teach you how to take part in battles and engage with the game's systems. Each suit that you get has a variety of different weapons. The game uses a rock, paper, scissors-like mechanic that determines which types of suits are strong or weak against others. There's only 3 types: raid, support, and general, so it's pretty simple. In battle, you can use ranged weapons, large or small, that take varying amounts of time to reload. You can also change your position, jump on a roof to get a better vantage point, but risk getting attacked while jumping or overheating your suit by using too much power. You can crouch and zoom in to do more damage, but this also leaves you open to attacks. You can use melee weapons like laser swords, which do a lot of damage to enemies and don't use ammo, but they also leave you open to attacks if you miss. You can stagger enemies with certain attacks as well, which prevents them from firing and moving. There's all sorts of little quirks in battle, advanced techniques that you can use to get more depth out of combat that I'm sure is useful if you play the game over a long enough period. But the real kicker to this game, as with any mobile game, are the microtransactions. Of course, it's a gacha game, so you pay to get supply drops. These then give you a random suit going from 1 to 5 stars based on rarity. You can then upgrade suits with various pieces of gear and equipment. Of course, this game survives because people pay for these things, and it does seem considerably pay to win. As for actually playing the game, you can either engage in battle simulations, which are missions where you're fighting an enemy AI, or you can fight against other players. I never actually got to fight against other players because the game was always trying to match me with people at a similar rank, and it seems like the only people that still play the game are the ones that have been playing for a while. The strangest thing about this game was that I couldn't get a general consensus from the reviews as to why people were actually dissatisfied with it. That doesn't mean that there weren't complaints, just that there were a lot of different ones. Certain people complained about being banned without warning after putting hundreds of hours in. Some complained about the toxic player base leaving games as soon as they realized they were going to lose. Others complained about the poor matchmaking, the servers crashing, and tons of people cited not being able to get into matches. The biggest problem for me was honestly just the way the game plays, though. The combat does not feel good whatsoever. Jumping is incredibly clunky, moving around and turning is not smooth at all. The whole thing just feels like a mess. I guess maybe you're supposed to feel some of this weight, being in a giant mech suit and all, but it should feel somewhat smooth to play. Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation 2 is not a game that I would recommend, and honestly, the best thing that it did was get me to start watching the original Gundam series, which is actually pretty awesome so far. Brighter Shores is a free-to-play MMO developed and published by Fen Research Limited. It was released on November 6, 2024 in early access, and currently has mixed review status on Steam with 8,537 reviews, 60% of those being positive. Fen Research, the company behind Brighter Shores, was founded in 2010 after Andrew Gower, one of the co-founders of Jagex and creators of the incredibly popular MMO RuneScape, left the company. Development on Brighter Shores began in 2016 and was meant to be a rival to RuneScape, to essentially right all of the perceived wrongs that Gower had with the original game's direction. Gower wanted more freedom to work on games and thus started another company to pursue that freedom. After 8 years of development, Brighter Shores would be released in early access. Brighter Shores is much like RuneScape at the level of fundamental appeal. The reasons you would seek this game out and the reasons you might be interested in it are the same between games. But Brighter Shores has a developmental ideology that is deeply rooted in trying to be everything that RuneScape isn't, even when it comes at the game's detriment. This distinction sometimes helps and other times harms Brighter Shores. As you start the game, you create a new character, one that is beginning their new job as a city guard in Hopeport. You take on some very simple quests, mostly tutorializing you on various features in the game. But the main quest culminates in a task that might take you some time. Before you can proceed, you must get your total level in Hopeport to 40, and you must get your combat level to 25. This takes quite a long time, and I honestly ended up putting a ton of hours into Brighter Shores just so I could see if I was really missing out on anything. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. The goal of Brighter Shores is similar to the goal of RuneScape. You must take part in various activities that will earn you experience and increase the level of your skills. These skills can be used further to earn money, and that money can be used to buy gear or regents, etc. But the goal, essentially, is to create a character that has more experience, whether that experience is in strength, crafting potions, or cutting down trees. You want to get those numbers higher. This can often take a long time, and people devote years to maxing out a skill in RuneScape. Brighter Shores' flaws are almost all fundamental, though. They're baked pretty deeply into the way that the game is designed. This doesn't mean that these things can't be changed, but it'll require more than a small balance fix to rectify. One of the biggest complaints I have is a more general one. This game is just very unsatisfying. It hasn't yet managed to capture the absolutely addicting nature of RuneScape. RuneScape is a game that you play dedicated, funneling hours and hours into trading and smithing and getting more money. Or you can play it more passively. It's one of the best second screen video games out there, while also being incredibly engaging. This is a delicate balance for any game to walk, and Brighter Shores is not doing a great job at not falling off to one side quite often. First of all, every skill is not available from the beginning of the game. Right away, you have combat, which you're trained in and asked to level up to 25. This skill seems to be area agnostic, but all the other skills in the game are associated with specific areas. For example, the starting area Hopeport has foraging, fishing, alchemy, and cooking. You can train each of these skills from the start of the game, but as for the rest of the skills, well, you have to wait until you unlock their associated area, which can take a while, and also requires that you train skills that you might not enjoy training. For example, you don't unlock Botanist, Carpenter, and Woodcutter until you reach the second zone, which can take quite a bit of time. The effect that this has on the game is massive. It feels like a railroad, a bottleneck that severely reduces how open the structure of the game is. While this would feel at home in a larger single-player open-world game, in an MMO it just feels unnecessary. This is also because most of the nodes that you use to level up your skills are localized to that one area as well. So all of the fishing nodes are in Hopeport. This means that leveling one skill localizes you to one specific area for the entirety of that skill. And that honestly just becomes boring very quickly. What's the difference between fishing for bass and then 3 levels later fishing for rays that are 2 grids over? Speaking of grids, Brighter Shores is built on a grid system. Instead of an open world like RuneScape, each area is broken up into these large squares made of smaller squares. Each node, each player, and each mob occupies one small square. And there's this sort of fog of war on the squares that you don't currently inhabit. This is such an odd choice from a design perspective. Some of it looks alright, but it just works to further break up the game into these small chunks. It's this efficiency that kills any sort of fun that the game could have. Every area is reduced to a small square, so a beach doesn't feel like a beach, it just feels like an array of separate and blocked off areas. This also feels like it kills exploration. To find new nodes, you have to head into different parts of the map and quote-unquote discover the nodes. And once again, this just kills any sort of spontaneity. Everything is relegated to blocks. And sure, you could make the argument that Minecraft is all blocks, but at least that feels like a connected and large world. There's wonder from the things you can see off in the distance. Imagine Minecraft if the entire world was split up into blocks of 6x6. It's also an MMO, which sort of lives or dies on its community. Now, I decided to play quite a bit of Brighter Shores because I wanted to get a good slice of what the game was really like. Did I actually need to do that? Probably not. But in my 25 hours of playtime, I only saw one person type a message in chat one time. I had all my social features turned on, so I wasn't blocking anyone out, but it also doesn't help that this game only had around 150 players when I was online. But Brighter Shores, at its core, feels like it's a single-player game. I mean, hell, you don't even have access to trading unless you pay for the Premium Pass, which is a monthly subscription for the game. This same Premium Pass also locks out the other 3 episodes for the game, meaning you can only access the first 2 areas without it. Now, to be fair, playing the game for free will get you a lot of content, but the debate is on whether that content is good or worth it, and frankly, I don't think that it is. There are passive activities in the game which can be unlocked after leveling skills up a certain amount. You're incentivized to set up a passive activity before logging out so that you'll still gain experience even when you're not playing. This feature feels like a half-in, half-out sort of ideology, where the active gameplay design isn't really good enough to ensure that people will be engaged, but that the passive gameplay isn't rewarding enough to not play the game. It's a weird middle ground that leaves you feeling like you should just stop playing the thing entirely. The game requires a lot from you in both time and attention, but you don't get a lot back in terms of things that are actually rewarding. You make progress, but it doesn't really feel like anything changes. There's a lot more problems with Brighter Shores. There are some fine-tuning balance changes that need to be done with how quickly experience is gained and how quickly actions are completed, but those are easy changes. Brighter Shores, if it wants to succeed, needs an almost complete overhaul. Its fundamental issues are too heavy for the rest of the game to support it. There are things that I enjoyed about the game. In fact, at a certain point, maybe in the first few hours, I was pretty hooked in and excited for what was to come because it felt like it could actually be a good alternative to RuneScape. But after those few hours, you realize that nothing new is really coming. This is just about it. You'll be farming the same nodes and training the same skills in just about the same way for the next 1,000 hours if you choose to. Brighter Shores isn't all bad, but it has a really long way to go if it plans to genuinely dethrone RuneScape's place in the MMO hierarchy. Samson is a third-person action-adventure game developed and published by Liquid Swords. It was released on April 8th, 2026 and currently has mixed review status on Steam, with 1,619 total reviews, 56% of those being positive. Samson is a game that was supposed to be much larger, though it was still styling itself a pared-down GTA clone, harkening back to the unique third-person shooters from the PS2 and 3 eras. It was pared down even more when the company was forced to lay off a large portion of their staff during development. This led to features being pruned, and the result is a game that feels not only incomplete, but half-baked in just about every definable way. Samson is a standard bargain bin PS3 game. Every good and bad thing that comes along with that statement applies here. You play a man named Samson McRae who is returning to his home city of Tyndallston after he was jailed for his part in a heist. He owes some money to a gang from St. Louis though and is being forced to pay them back. They then take his sister as collateral and require that Samson pay the debt back over time. So as we begin the game, we're given the ability to take on small jobs around town. Completing these jobs will give us money and experience. Every day we have a certain amount of debt that we have to pay though. On top of that debt, we can use money to upgrade our car. Samson is a bit open in terms of what jobs you can do because you only have so much time in a day. Specifically, the day is split up into 3 sections: noon, evening, and night. Each of these sections allows you to use 2 action points. Generally, longer missions require 2 or 3, and shorter ones only use 1. When you're out of action points, you're done for the day and must sleep, essentially putting a cap on how much money you can earn per day. The action point system isn't something that I absolutely hated. I honestly think the idea is ambitious and interesting enough for this type of game. It introduces a sense of urgency and anxiety that's tied to a time limit. It illustrates and makes the player engage with the sword of Damocles that is payments looming over them, whether these payments are for mobsters after your head or health insurance companies. What's really the difference, am I right? This naturally leads to game choice and increased player agency, which is good. This system, though, is unfortunately attached to a game that doesn't know what to do with it, so I'm afraid that it's a bit wasted here. First of all, you can upgrade the amount of action points that you get in a day, but you can only do this by investigating these small points of interest all over town. These are basically small spots from Samson's life that he reminisces on. It's a quiet insight into his character and his past. While these seem optional because they're heavily connected to such an integral system, you effectively have to engage with them. This causes situations like this constantly, where you almost zoom past a point of interest, reverse the car, get out, and investigate it, only to get back in and head to your destination. It's a very clunky implementation, and I guarantee that these systems would work more smooth if the action points were connected to skill tree progression. There's all sorts of collectible rewards, like your car gets more NOS tanks from smashing these political candidate boards in town, and you get more special power from collecting combat magazines. There's 2 main systems in Samson, though, that are both near absolute failures. The first is the combat. In Samson, unfortunately, there is no ranged combat system. Even though we're spending our time on the mean streets of Southside, brushing shoulders with criminals and gangsters and mobsters, we can't ever get a gun. This is because this feature was cut during development, so the team had to rely on the melee combat system, which is, at best, not fully formed. We can light attack, heavy attack, dodge, parry, and even pick up items on the ground. None of this is that complex, though. But combat systems don't need to be complex to work well. Far simpler systems are more successful. Samson's lack of complexity isn't what kills it, it's its lack of fine-tuning and general ease of use. During combat, you can use painkillers to heal, which take far too long to actually consume, so you often get hit or die while trying to do this. You can dodge and parry, but often get stuck on enemies or the environment while trying to get away. Foes sometimes attack from outside your camera view, getting a free hit in when you aren't aware. Most of the time, outside of a few rare enemies, spamming the light attack button just kills goons, and hitting them with one heavy attack ends the entire thing. The whole system is just clunky and extremely repetitive. The skills that you can unlock from gaining levels do add a bit of variety to combat, but it's mostly in passive abilities, increasing the effectiveness of your special mode, increasing the amount of damage you do when low on health, etc. But by far my least favorite part of the game, and something that takes up a substantial slice of Samson's runtime, is the driving. There are a lot of missions that require driving. Sometimes you have to drive with someone to escape the police. Sometimes you have to pick someone up and protect them after dropping them off. And the worst type of mission, takedowns, require you to run a car off the road to get rid of it. These missions are very common and utilize a mechanic called the side ram. This allows you to ram your vehicle sideways into an enemy. It's just as clunky as it sounds and barely ever works when you want it to. Your car has a health bar in this game and takes damage when you hit enemy cars or objects. This also rarely ever works how you would expect it to. Often I would hit a car in the wrong way and it would barely damage the other vehicle, but would remove half of my health. The whole system is just flawed, and the driving doesn't feel good at all. There's far too much weight to these vehicles, and turning is basically an impossibility at any speed over 15 miles per hour. There's also races in the game that have straight up some of the worst designed racetracks I've ever seen. If I haven't mentioned it yet, Samson also has a story. This is told through chapter missions that can be done instead of the side missions. These chapter missions still require action points, so they feed back into the action point system and require you to carve out specific time for them. The missions themselves aren't anything special and are essentially the same thing as the side missions, just with a different skin. Drive someone to this place, run a car off the road, or take out some bad guys. The story itself follows Samson trying to track down a group of people who attacked his friends and shot Nate at the local bar. They run this up the chain and eventually find out that a woman named Nicola has been pitting the gangs in the city against each other so that she can eat homeless people. It's really weird. It feels like it would have made much more sense for the main story to be centered around Samson doing jobs for his sister, who is currently being held for ransom, but that really only applies to the money-making aspect of the game. It's very strange. Samson is so incredibly flawed, but I can't say that there weren't moments where I appreciated the idea and the concept. Honestly, the whole idea is something that's right up my alley. I love games that include time mechanics, systems that force the player to make decisions and keep a ticking clock in the back of their head. But this system isn't well implemented here, and neither are the other systems that are doing the heavy lifting for the game. Samson might be worth checking out in a few years if the developers continue their trend of steady updates and fixes, but as for now, it's a tedious and repetitive exercise that doesn't reward the player with much outside of the same missions over and over. Trading Card Shop Simulator is a simulation game developed by Nostra Games. It was released on March 6th, 2026 and has mostly negative review status on Steam with 17 total reviews, 23% of those being positive. If you're thinking you've seen this game before, I don't blame you, because Trading Card Shop Simulator is one of the most blatant ripoffs that I've ever seen. This game is clearly ripping off TCG Card Shop Simulator, a very successful game that released in early access in 2024. In the original game, you own and manage a card shop. You buy stock, which usually consists of card packs, accessories for the playing card game, and a wide variety of other products that can be placed on shelves and sold. You can adjust the price of these items, buy new furniture, expand and upgrade your shop, run the checkout line, all of this and more. But one of the biggest parts of TCG Card Shop Simulator is being able to open the packs that you sell. You can build your own card collection, or you can sell those cards that you pull in your shop and make a big profit. This game is obviously cashing in on the massive popularity of trading card games, and it does it very well. It's not quite a beautiful game, but there's at least a genuine effort in it, and the gameplay loop is very satisfying and rewarding. Trading Card Shop Simulator is almost identical to TCG Card Shop Simulator, even going back to the name and logo, which are just almost indistinguishable from each other. And this is not just a similar concept with a new skin. It's not even a new skin, it's the exact same game. The way that you unlock packs to sell is exactly the same. The interface for setting prices is exactly the same. About 90% of the keybinds that the developer decided to use are exactly the same. Hell, even the placement of the trash can and the light switch are exactly the same. This is maybe the most blatant ripoff of another game that I've ever seen. And on top of that, the developer is very lazy because all of the art in the game is AI generated. The cover for the Steam page is AI, the art for all of the packs are AI generated, the art for the cards themselves, the one thing people probably care about, AI generated. So, of course, Nostra Games couldn't even come up with their own idea for a game. They also had to use AI to create art for that same unoriginal idea. Trading Card Shop Simulator introduces absolutely nothing new to the formula that TCG Card Shop set up. In fact, it arguably makes the formula much worse. The balance is so poor that within the first hour of playing the game, you're nearly done with it because you gain so much money so quickly. The products on the shelves seem to sell no matter what. In fact, I had to stock products multiple times a day because my shelves were just immediately empty after the store opened. The same thing happened when I was placing new cards on the table. They'd often be grabbed the instant I put them down. I thought this was a bug at first, but then I realized this was a rabid fan that was snatching the card from my hands before I could put it down. But I've played a lot of rip-off games for this series, and never have I seen the branding and every single mechanic and even the design just straight up directly stolen. These types of games usually at least try to differentiate themselves somewhat. Like, I would expect this game to be the exact same thing as TCG Card Shop Simulator, but with baseball cards or something. The developer couldn't even go that far and decided to just rip off the game. The other thing is, this isn't the first time that Nostra Games has done this. Their one successful game from 2023 was called Rush Only Up Multiplayer, which was a ripoff of the Only Up game from that time. And shortly after releasing Trading Card Shop Simulator, the developer released Fool's Pub, which is a direct and blatant ripoff of the successful game Liar's Bar. Seemingly, their only slightly original idea was this year's The Exit Project Backstreets, which is a 10-minute psychological horror game that doesn't do much at all. They've released 3 of these games in 7 months, so I'm sure they're using AI for more than just assets at this point. I think these games are being churned out to attempt to make a profit off of other people's ideas, and I'm glad to say that most of the time, it isn't working. Legend of YMIR is an MMORPG that was developed by WeMade and was released on April 4th, 2026. It currently has mostly negative review status on Steam with 1,072 total reviews, 24% of those being positive. I made a massive mistake when I started playing Legend of YMIR. I tried to actually play it. I quickly realized that I am an idiot. Because you're not supposed to actually play this game, you're supposed to watch it play itself and reap the rewards or something, who knows. The game is very similar to any other mobile MMO out there. You start the game with 100 icons and functions and features, and shit is just thrown at you until you can't see because your face is so covered. At some point, you're taught how to fight, you might even be taught how to craft weapons or upgrade abilities, but you're also eventually told to pony up, baby, because this game is free to play, so you gotta spend that hard-earned cash. The controls for Legend of YMIR are unlike anything else I've ever seen. When fighting enemies, your character automatically locks onto one, even if you don't want to fight that enemy. Your attacks are essentially negligible because you never get into a situation where killing enemies is difficult. You have a bunch of random attacks on your bar, but God knows what those do. And of course, there's 1,000 login events, rewards, quest completion achievements, exploration achievements, daily quests, seasonal events, so on and so forth. It just keeps going and you just keep getting more garbage. But none of it is ever really explained. Like, why get more stuff if there's no weight to the things we're actually getting? At a certain point pretty early on, I realized that you can press the Q button, and the game will just play itself. The Q button causes your character to head out and complete the current objective for the main story quest. Your character will walk on their own to the destination, they'll interact with the objective, and only when the objective changes is their input required from the player, which is really just pressing Q again to do it for the next objective. This automatic feature will even attack enemies for you as long as it's part of the mission objective. To be clear, this isn't like an accessibility feature that you can turn on. This is just how the game is supposed to be played. Because honestly, Legend of YMIR is much better when you're only half paying attention to it. Trying to actually play this game feels like fighting a bear over a fish. It's a constant struggle, but what you're supposed to do is give in and let the river of automatic play take your body downstream. Have you ever seen a game revealed at a showcase and thought, man, this game looks great, but I wish I could just watch it. I don't want to play it. That's what Legend of YMIR is. Hell, you see people getting mad about games like Mixtape that don't require much player engagement, but where's the hate for games like this? Outside of all of that, Legend of YMIR does look kind of cool sometimes. There's cutscenes where large gods are fighting each other and it kind of looks sick. I'm not exactly sure what's happening, but it's pretty cool, but that's not really enough to keep anyone around. In all seriousness, the auto feature kind of killed the game for me. It's not polished enough to engage with manually because it's just frustrating to use, but it's also not fun enough to engage with automatically because it's basically an idle game with less rewarding progression. If I wanted to play an idle game, I'd just go play Cookie Clicker again or Melvor Idle. Most of the negative reviews for Legend of YMIR aren't even about the quality of the game itself though. They're mostly from when the game released on Steam, citing the fact that the anti-hack protection was preventing them from playing it, or they're addressing performance issues, and even on my machine, I still dealt with some stuttering from time to time. This game reminds me most of Game of Thrones King's Road, the mobile game that was released last year. It's very similar in structure and style, but at least Game of Thrones King's Road I could play out of irony for 30 hours or so. It was a fun game to hate and required me to actually play it to judge its quality. Legend of YMIR is just nothing. Clumsy Knight 2 is a strategy game developed by Bigwood Games that was released on March 30th, 2017. It currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 17 total reviews, 23% of those being positive. Clumsy Knight 2 is a game that wears its inspiration heavily on its sleeve. In fact, it takes a lot of inspiration from the Heroes of Might and Magic games. In Clumsy Knight 2, you roam around a world with a team of hired mercenaries. You attempt to take control of the various castles around that world. You do this by getting into fights with smaller mobs and upgrading your soldiers, while also upgrading your player character that leads them. At its core, I honestly don't have that much of a problem with this game. It's essentially a very simplified version of what Heroes of Might and Magic has already done for years. A lot of the strategy and deeper numbers crunching is taken out in favor of a more casual experience. The game is also particularly short, which is also fine because it's only $3. I actually believe the game was at one point released on mobile, and this was a PC port. All that being said, I don't hate this game, but that doesn't mean there aren't downsides. First of all, the game has absolutely no tutorial, and I think if I didn't have a childhood filled with replays of Quest for the Dragonbone Staff on the PS2, I'm not sure I would have had any idea what was going on. The game doesn't tell you literally anything and hides most of the stats in a page that you probably wouldn't know was accessible unless you were just testing buttons like I was. The main loop of the game looks like this. You start out with a certain number of troops, you journey around the world and use those troops to fight enemies. Combat is automatic for the most part. Your soldiers attack the enemy soldiers, and the number beside their health meter goes down for each troop in that squad killed. At various buildings around the world, you can recruit different troop types by spending gold. You get gold from killing enemies and from chests where you can also increase your leadership stat, which allows you to hire more troops. This goes on until you amass enough money and leadership to recruit a large amount of troops and take on the castles in the surrounding area. The first problem with this whole loop is that it's pretty repetitive and simple. There are small things on the map that shake stuff up. You can find buildings that increase your income, you can find relics that increase your stats, but for the most part, we're just engaging in this same loop that we do when we start the game, with slow power increments to boost our progress. It's not earth-shatteringly bad, but it's also nothing to write home about. The second big factor is just that the combat and pathfinding for the AI is awful. Most of the time I would have 4 squads on my side and only 1 or 2 of them would be able to attack the enemy at once, because the others were stuck on some feature of the environment. Or worse, they were stuck on their allies, meaning they just stood nearby and watched another squad get pummeled while they waited for their turn. Sometimes they would move around and attack the enemy from the open side, but this mistake often led to me losing battles. The whole thing is kind of clunky, but I can't say that it's terrible. Especially for the price, this game is mostly fine. It's a decently simplified version of what King's Bounty and Heroes of Might and Magic had been doing for a long time. but also I wouldn't go out of my way to play it if I were you. Girl with a Big Sword is a turn-based RPG game developed by N-Boys and was released on October 4th, 2018. The game currently has negative review status on Steam with 44 total reviews, 15% of those being positive. Girl with a Big Sword is one of the most broken games I've ever played, and that's saying a lot because I've been doing this series for years at this point. Girl with a Big Sword is a game made on the RPG Maker engine. This isn't a point of criticism in and of itself because there are plenty of amazing and groundbreaking games made on that same engine. Omori, Fear and Hunger, and Hylix, just to name a few. So the engine isn't the problem, but what the game does with the engine is. These particularly broken games are best explained as I played them and messed around with them, so I'll take you through my playthrough. I started the game and was prompted to create a character. Here you can choose obviously between two genders, men and girl. You then can name your character, but the keyboard is in Russian, so I just left these options as the default. You're then plopped into a town with no introduction whatsoever. I spoke to the first NPC I could find, and they said, "Greetings, help me get the grassy solution," and then disappeared. This happens quite a lot in this game, in fact. Sometimes it seems to happen when NPCs have nothing more to say to you, and other times it happens even when NPCs should still be used for a quest, but they just disappear anyways. There's an axe that can't be equipped in a nearby chest. Grabbing items also rarely ever notifies you of what you picked up, you just have to check your inventory for anything new. A nearby man asks for 5 Stimulatoriov and preneshes us his respect. Speaking to the head of the town reads, "Greeting, I am the head of the city. Years ago, our city was captured by thieves, murderers, monsters. Help them over reward, for all that we had now is located at them. You will conquer them, and all the gold will be yours. Good luck." And then she disappears. I then went into a nearby building where I fought a bat, but realized that I started the game with 1 health and was immediately killed. This wasn't nearly the end with my journey in Girl with a Big Sword, just my first toe being dipped into its tepid and unhospitable waters. At first, I thought I had hit a wall. I actually try to play far more games for this series than I end up covering. A lot of these games are negatively reviewed because they don't run or won't even start. That, or you can only get 5 minutes in and there isn't enough to talk about. I thought this was one of those cases and that I'd have to scrap it from the video, but then I kept trying. I eventually realized through a lot of testing that there's a bug in this game. When you exit a building or enter the town at all, your health is reset to 1. This even happens if you heal in town. Your health automatically resets to 1. If you heal in battle or inside of a building, then your health stays until you enter the town again. Now, obviously, the poorly translated NPC dialogue is a huge concern for this game, but the fact that you can't get above 1 health in town makes things pretty difficult. I had to start a new game though, because the men and girl characters start with different skills, and the girl has a heal skill right off the bat. It's nearly impossible to survive as the men character because he can only heal with potions, and you can't get gold without killing enemies. With the girl character, you have to heal on the first turn no matter what. Once you've got some health, the rest is simple because the enemies barely do any damage and only seem to have 1 attack. So you just spam inputs until the enemy dies, you get some gold and level up, and you're good. Once I got a decent amount of gold, I realized that you can buy a gun from the shop, which seems to be one of the better weapons in the game. You can just annihilate any enemy in 1 shot because it's so strong. Talking to a lot of the NPCs, they seem to have requests. One of them wanted me to get them a log, but I could only find an item in the shop called Log for Girls. One man wanted me to take out the assassin in his home, and another woman wanted me to open a chest that was right next to her. Most of these NPCs disappeared, so I couldn't complete their quests. I decided to head out into the overworld finally, expecting to get to another town or maybe a dungeon. After about 15 minutes of searching for literally anything, I was about to give up, but I stumbled upon a door in the overworld map, just standing there amongst the grass and the hills. Inside was a massive complex lit with torches, and nefarious coloring meant that it had to be home to the game's big bad, or at least some sort of boss. It was just one assassin enemy that I killed in one hit. But there was a skull item in the building, which I remembered one woman in town asked for at the beginning of the game. So I made my way back, only to realize that the NPC had already disappeared. The strangest thing about this game that I found while I was looking through the DLC is that there is a free add-on for 18 and up content. I, of course, decided to try this out because of curiosity. And it's literally nothing. I at least thought this would explain why the game was so broken, that it was supposed to rely on the game's adult status and would bring more people in, but it didn't even have that. I don't know what this game is about or what you're supposed to do in it. There really is no story, and even if there was, it would most likely be too poorly translated to comprehend. The game doesn't function without some serious workarounds. Most of the reviews only have a few minutes on record because I and an unlucky few had the patience to figure out how to get past the bugs in the game. Most of my journey with this game was a search for meaning where there was none, diving through a void, looking for some piece of loose matter to grab onto. This journey was ultimately futile. Hopefully, someone will help me get to the grassy solution. The Shopkeeper is a point-and-click adventure game developed by Tome de Roque and was released on October 23rd, 2014. It currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 20% of those reviews being positive. The Shopkeeper is a really interesting idea with some flawed execution. That being said, it was ultimately a project that I wasn't entirely disappointed with. The game itself is a Groundhog Day style situation. Every loop that we interact with is a man entering an antique store and then speaking to the receptionist. This receptionist then tells him a story about one of the items there, and then he heads upstairs and speaks with the owner, who happens to be his mother-in-law. He pleads his case, requesting more money for one of his business ventures, and we get a different ending based on choices made throughout the game. That's it, and one loop of the game is honestly pretty short, only taking about 5 minutes. So what choices can you make to adjust the course of the game? Well, at the beginning, before the main character enters the shop, you can select any of the items to hear a brief piece of their history, and a longer version after the main character has entered. Once upstairs, you can do the same thing with objects in the room, which may affect the outcome of the game. In dialogue, you can select various prompts. These are essentially story outcomes, as if a narrator is writing down prose and we're choosing the next sentence. In reality, the shopkeeper is downstairs telling this man the story that we're seeing. Through different options, we learn a bit more about the characters and their story. The mother-in-law seems to detest her son-in-law, mainly because he isn't successful, but also because he inhabits a different generation than her. She made her own way and pulled herself up by her bootstraps, so to speak, and he's here asking for help, asking for money, which she finds fundamentally wrong. This also isn't the first time that it's happened, which draws her ire even further. The son-in-law has no good feelings for the woman either. He thinks her a decaying obstacle sat in the way of his opportunity. The situation is further contextualized by pursuing different endings. It seems like the main ending to the story is when the son-in-law decides to murder the mother-in-law with a string from the clock beside her desk. The man in the store then decides to buy the clock, and it's revealed this is all a story being written on a page by an author. There's a lot to love about this game. First of all, it's short and sweet. You can probably get all of the achievements and endings in a couple hours or so. If you want to just see the few main endings, maybe it runs 30 minutes. The art is gorgeous, even though it can look a little goofy. It has a certain charm to it and looks very distinct. Engaging with the game further means learning more about the story and characters. Because of the initial setup, there's enough mystery to keep the player invested. But with all those pros comes a few flaws. First of all, the voice acting ranges from pretty decent to downright awful. Jeff Ricketts plays the customer and does a pretty decent job. Ricketts is known for a handful of roles in various movies and TV shows.
Yes, about that first product, the market conditions have shifted.
But the voice actor for the receptionist is just not very good at all.
A lovely item. It belonged to a cavalry officer in the Franco-Prussian War. He wanted people to believe he was a hard-drinking, devil-may-care man, so he drank often from his flask, which was filled with water.
And the mother-in-law perhaps puts a bit too much inflection on some of her delivery for what the character is trying to do.
You think I'll continue to bail out your failing company for the sake of my daughter? You've run through her money, and now you want to run through mine. I love my family, perhaps more than you can understand.
Because of the gameplay loop and the lack of hints, figuring out what combinations will get you which endings can be pretty tedious. For example, the only way to get the quote-unquote real ending for the game is to select the clock before you start speaking with the mother-in-law, and then select 3 specific dialogue prompts after that. There are some hints in the game toward this, but very few, and they're pretty vague. The game definitely could have benefited from some better design or a meta system that guided the player in the right direction. Outside of that, though, I think the Shopkeeper is an interesting idea, just with some flawed execution. I really saw what the developer was going for here and what they were trying to do. Create a point-and-click adventure game that rewards player investigation with story details. Some of it's more rewarding than other parts, but I think the game works for the most part. It's not a perfect game, and it is particularly short, but if it looks like something you'd be interested in, give it a chance. March of Industry is a crafting simulation game developed by Archive Entertainment that was released on October 7th, 2015. It currently has very negative review status on Steam with 72 total reviews, 19% of those being positive. March of Industry is a simulation game in the same vein as Factorio or Satisfactory, except that it's far, far more simplified. In the game, you place machines that combine or process resources. You then input resources into these machines, and they spit something out based on what you put in. If you input sand, you get glass. Input glass, you get a disc. Input iron, and you get a magnet. There are 2 input machines as well where you can combine resources. There are no recipes given to you, so you sort of just have to guess which resources will combine properly. This is part of the fun of the game though, finding new recipes to be able to craft. Once you refine resources enough or combine them, you'll eventually get a weapon. These weapons can then be sold to make more money. That's the whole goal. Invest in resources and combine those resources to create a weapon and then sell that weapon for a profit. The premise of the game is fine, though it's certainly not anything new. A lot of the appeal of the game is in the outputs that you get from combinations. Bronze and silicone combine to create a gun that shoots laser guns, and combining disc with broadcast tower creates a weapon called All Actors Replaced with Jeff Bridges.
Your opinion, man. Your opinion, man. Your opinion, man.
It's definitely not my style of humor, as it's a bit lay random for me, but the basic premise was interesting. It's a shame though, because the systems at play here are just far too rudimentary for the game to be satisfying on its own. Combining conveyors and setting up machines is just clunky and odd. Stuff always ends up flying off the machines or not going into the boxes you directed it towards. It ends up requiring a lot of manual intervention from the player. You can put barricades beside the conveyors, but it just requires so much setup that it isn't even really worth the reward. You can make a system that automates pretty well, but it requires maneuvering throughout the kind of broken system to get there. If the mechanics in the game were just polished a bit more, if you could designate a specific box for one resource and have that resource appear in there when you purchased it, if the developer included curved conveyor pieces, if you could set weapons to automatically sell so you didn't clog up your space, the whole thing would probably be a lot more satisfying. Outside of all of this, March of Industry is incredibly short, only taking about an hour and some change to beat. And for a $10 price tag, that's a bit too much to ask in my opinion. The game certainly isn't worth that much, as you've seen everything you can in one sitting. The game itself is mostly fine for what it is. It's a good concept that's interesting and fun to toy around with for a little bit, but once you start encountering the quirks of the system, you won't be having fun for much longer. Reaper Actual is an extraction shooter developed by Distinct Possibility Studios. It was released on May 29th, 2026, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 60 total reviews, 20% of those being positive. The extraction shooter is the hot new genre on the market right now. Every studio and their publisher are trying to get their hands on the next breakout success on the scene. Arc Raiders, Marathon, Delta Force, you name it, they got an extraction shooter coming. Reaper Actual is Distinct Possibilities' attempt to put their hat in the ring, and the bottom line is that this game just doesn't do enough new stuff to really make the purchase or the time investment worth it. On top of that, this game is supposed to be in an early access state, but it seems far too early for even that. First of all, I had this game crash multiple times while playing it. If you're not aware of how an extraction shooter works, it's pretty important that the game be stable. In an extraction shooter, you generally have a base or menu where you can store items. Before the mission, you decide which items to take with you based on what you're planning. You can take armor to prevent more damage, you can take ammo for your weapon so you don't have to procure it on site, you can even take specific, more high quality weapons. The reason it's important that you choose what you want to take is that when you die, you lose all of the items you had on you. These items are left on the ground and players can approach and take what they want. So every outing into the world is a risk-reward situation. Risking losing more gear also means that you'll be more prepared to deal with enemies. Risking less gear means you'll have to rely more on skill, and the whole point of deploying out on missions is to get more gear. You can kill enemies to take their weapons, ammo, armor, attachments, resources, etc., or you can loot the same things from caches in the world. If you manage to get to an extraction point before dying, then you'll keep all of the items that you gathered. Back at the base, you can then sell these items, put them in your vault for future runs, or take them out on another deployment. Reaper Actual works, for the most part, exactly like all of the other extraction shooters. That being said, it doesn't have the polish or the features that the more recent ones do. Like I mentioned before, the game crashed when I was on my first outing. I had gained some decent weapons and ammo, and that was just kind of lost when I started the game back up, because technically I didn't extract. The game also crashed as I was trying to extract from my second mission. The whole thing is pretty unstable and takes quite a long time to load. One of the other problems that the devs can't really fix without just fixing the game and marketing a bit more is that there just isn't anyone playing. I was the only person online when I booted the game up, though there seemed to be a max of 6 people online at one time in the last 24 hours. There are still NPCs around the world, ones that make up a few different factions. You can kill these foes and take their equipment instead, so the game is still functional, just not as fun or intense as it would be if the servers were full. There's of course other problems with the game too. Boxes that contain equipment seem to spawn back in way too fast. The game just looks incredibly rough. There's an obvious lack of any sort of tutorial or missions, and there's artifacts all over the game of placeholders. The bottom line is that Reaper Actual is just far too early into development to necessitate an early access version. I understand that it's early access and they're looking for feedback, but this is what closed alphas are for. I will give the team credit and say that they are making consistent updates to the game. This is definitely not just a cash grab where they've run away with the money. The team even has semi-regular town hall meetings to ask about progress on the game. Maybe in a few years with some consistent work, Reaper Actual will be worth checking out, but honestly right now, it just isn't worth the money or the time. With that, we've once again talked about another 10 of the worst reviewed games on Steam. Let me know how you felt about these games. Did you play them? Were they as bad as I thought? And what's the worst game that you've ever played on Steam? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe. You can also head over to the Patreon by clicking the link in the description, and you'll be able to join this list of amazing people right here. You'll also get access to monthly media reports where I talk about every single thing I consumed in the previous month. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye, Dad.